All right, let's get right into this. This is a gut-wrenching story, and a really powerful one. And yeah, it's about the brutal system of slavery, but it's really about something more. It's about what a person is willing to go through just to hold on to who they are.
So, we're not starting in Africa, which might surprise you. We're starting on a plantation in Virginia, and it all comes down to one man's refusal. Just a simple sentence, a statement of who he was. That was going to cost him everything. See, he'd just been bought, and they gave him a new name, Toby. And the expectation was simple. You accept it. But he wouldn't.
And that just makes you think, right? Why would someone endure torture over a name? To get that, we have to rewind. We have to go back and understand who this man was before he was considered property, before he was even captured. We got to look at the life that was ripped away from him.
So to really get why he resisted so fiercely, we have to see his home. We have to see the world he came from, the world that was stolen, and what he was fighting so desperately to remember.
So before he was a slave, Kunta Kinte was, well, he was a person, a whole person, a 17-year-old Mandinka warrior from a village called Juur. He had a community, a history, a name that meant something. I mean, Kunta literally means complete or whole. This wasn't just some kid. He'd finished his manhood training. He could recite his family's story back 7 generations. He was on track to be a respected elder. He was, in every sense of the word, complete.
And just look at how fast this all happened. It's terrifying. He's out gathering wood for a drum, and 90 seconds later, 90 seconds, he's ambushed, bound, and gagged. A free man becomes merchandise just like that. In a matter of days, he's inspected like livestock and thrown on a slave ship. His entire future, just gone. Erased by this brutal, efficient machine.
And this right here, this shows you the process. It's a systematic erasure. On one side, you have who he was, Kunta Kinte, a Mandinka warrior, son of Amaro. On the other side, what he became, male, approximately 17 years old, Mandinka origin, property, cargo. Every single piece of his identity was just scrubbed away and replaced with a label for a ship's log. This was way more than a physical kidnapping. It was an attack on his soul.
So what came next was the journey itself, the infamous Middle Passage. And you have to understand, this was an industrial operation of pure human misery. The whole design was about one thing, profit. And that meant cramming as many human bodies as physically possible into the tiniest space you can imagine. 30%. Just let that number sink in. That was the death rate on his trip across the Atlantic. Out of 140 people forced onto that ship, the Lord Ligonier, 42 of them died. To the owners, that was just an acceptable loss, a cost of doing business. But for the people chained up below deck, it was an absolute living hell.
And these conditions, my God. We're talking 16 inches of width per person. You're chained ankle to ankle with the person next to you. The heat is suffocating. The air is poison. You get 1 meal a day, barely any water. Sickness like dysentery and fever just rip through the hold. And then this. For 18 hours, Kunta was chained to the dead body of the man next to him. Can you even imagine? This wasn't just neglect. It was all part of a cold, calculated system.
But even in the middle of all that horror, he started to fight back, not with his fists, but with his mind. He began this private ritual. Every single day, he would silently recite his family history, his lineage. It was his first real act of resistance. It was a lifeline, a way of telling himself, I am still here. I am still a whole person, even as they tried to turn him into nothing more than cargo. So after surviving that nightmare, he arrives in Annapolis, Maryland. He's sold to a man named John Waller and taken to a tobacco plantation in Virginia. And this is where the fight for his very soul really begins. The process was simple. The owner calls him Toby. Kunta corrects him. My name is Kunta Kinte. And for that, he's punished. And this just keeps happening over and over. It wasn't him being stubborn. For him, accepting that new name, Toby, would have been like a spiritual death. It would mean he was letting them win, letting them define who he was. So he took the beatings. It all came to a head in this awful public whipping, where he was beaten until he passed out. And he never, not once, said the name Toby. But his spirit was nowhere near broken. He tried to escape. He made a run for it. But the system was just relentless. He only made it 8 miles before professional slave catchers with dogs tracked him down. They dragged him back, and the punishment was public and brutal. It was meant to be a terrifying message to everyone else. And he still didn't give up. He tried again. This time, he was free for 3 whole days before they caught him. And the consequence for this attempt? It was permanent. To make sure he could never run again, the owner had half of Kunta's right foot cut off. And you have to understand this was a cold economic calculation, a common practice. It was a way to keep a person valuable for labor while absolutely crushing their hope of ever being free.
Okay, so now physical escape is off the table. It's impossible. But that doesn't mean his resistance ended. No way. It just changed. It transformed into something they could never, ever take from him, his legacy.
This became his new rebellion. He had a daughter, Kizzy, born in 1773, and he taught her everything. He taught her his language, the Mandinka words. He told her stories of her grandfather, Omaro. He painted a picture for her of their village, Jafori, of a world where their family was free. He was making sure the story, his story, would outlive his chains.
And you know what? That story, it survived. Kunta Kinte himself died a slave in 1822. His body was never free. But his story, it was passed down from Kizzy to her children and to their children for 7 generations, just an oral tradition. And finally, that story found its freedom when his descendant Alex Haley published the book Roots in 1976. And that book, well, changed everything. It made his story a global symbol of resistance.
So it leaves us with this big question, right? When you can't be physically free, is holding on to who you are, is that a kind of victory? Kunta Kinte's life makes us look at some really hard truths about history. He never saw a day of freedom again. The system that caught him literally worked him to death. But by refusing, absolutely refusing to let them erase who he was, he won a different kind of battle. He left behind a legacy of survival that still challenges us and inspires us to this day.